Today's guests are Dr. Kelly Starrett and Juliet Starrett. Kelly Starrett is the co-author of the New York Times bestselling book, Becoming a Supple Leopard, Ready to Run, and the Wall Street Journal bestseller, Deskbound. I've been following his work since 2014 and would consider Kelly to be the first functional physical therapist in practice where he merged activity, physical therapy, and holistic living together to not only improve and heal his patients, but to watch them thrive. He's worked with athletes and coaches from the NFL, NBA, NHL, and NBL, and the U.S. Olympic team. He is the co-founder of The Ready State and the co-founder of the San Francisco CrossFit. His wife, Juliet Starrett, is an entrepreneur, attorney, author, and podcaster. She's also the co-founder and CEO of The Ready State and the former co-founder and CEO of San Francisco CrossFit. She is the co-author of the Wall Street Journal bestseller Deskbound and was a professional whitewater paddler, winning 3 world champions and 5 national titles. She lives in California with her husband, Kelly, and it's a pleasure to bring them both on the show today to talk about their newest book, Built to Move, the 10 Essential Habits to Help You Move Freely and Live Fully. You guys, I'm so excited for today's guests. It's Kelly and Juliet Starrett. I have followed Kelly's work since the Supple Leopard. We were talking about an old conference we were all at together. And Juliet, his wife, is sometimes known as J-Star. So if I call her J-Star, just to get you guys all on board. Both of them were at this amazing conference, and I fell in love with the Supple Leopard. I stood up out of my chair at the conference, checked my posture, learned that I definitely wasn't a Supple Leopard. Let's just put it that way. But I followed your work ever since. It's such a pleasure to have you both on the show. Your parents, your advocates for health among children and adults. I would say, Kelly, you're known as being like one of the godfathers of CrossFit. So thank you so much for joining me today and sharing your story. You have a new book coming out called Built to Move. It's centered around 10 assessments of physical practices that can easily and consistently be incorporated into your everyday life so that your body can start to work better. And I will tell you, as I eke towards 40 in July, it's even more important that this body works functionally late until my 90s or 100s. You know, I'm not going to claim to be 120, but I just want to be able to move with my kids and my grandkids and do the things that I love so much, which is mostly be active in nature with my family. So thank you for being here and sharing your wisdom, and welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having us. And it's so fun to chat with you in the pre-show a little bit and see all the connections we have. So we're so excited to chat you up today.
I know, it's exciting. Well, let's start with you guys. Can we talk about how you two met? I know it's a story that you detail in your book, but you guys are such a cute couple and you have your kids and your super active lifestyle. And I'm a romantic at heart. So can you start from the beginning of your relationship?
Let's hear it.
Check this out.
I'll do Kelly will tell the story and I will add color commentary.
Okay.
I have some meager talents.
Okay.
One of them is carrying heavy things. I can do that. Second thing is I am really good at pattern recognition. Like it's like a superpower.
Yeah.
And in that skill of pattern recognition is recognizing talent. And so imagine I am a kayak rep. I've just quit the national team. I'm sleeping in the truck with my dog. And I meet this woman who is an internet professional, world champion. And I start chatting her up. Not only is she very cute, she's also going to law school. And I remember thinking, well, I just solved it. Like I can see the tea leaves. So Juliet is on the women's team from California, and I'm on the men's based team in Colorado.
And can I just color commentary that we are doing this really weird fringe sport, whitewater paddling, extreme whitewater paddling, where we are doing 3 separate events on these epic class 5 rivers in, strange places all over the world. Really fringe sport here in the US, but it's actually kind of like a big deal sport in a lot of other countries. Like it's funded by their national governments. But here in the US, people are like, what? That's a sport? So just a little side note there.
Can I just interject for one second? So I've been whitewater rafting and I've been maybe on one, like what they would call 5. They grade them by numbers. But are you going in this little boat by yourself?
No, in those days, it was teams of 6 people.
Okay.
But they, the whole thing was televised, and they would put us in these like overly small boats. So we'd be packed in 6 people in like what, 12 to 13 foot long rafts, which are small for 6 people. And then combine that with, doing it on these really hard class 5 rivers. And just to give you an idea of what they were going for in terms of camera footages, there would be, helicopters going up and down the canyons, filming the whole thing. And all the sponsors' names were on the underside of the rafts. So the plan and expectation was for us to just be flipping everywhere and swimming these huge rapids, right? Because if you just make it through, it's like not as exciting for television. So yeah, that's the stage. Is we're at the World Championships on this and huge river in Patagonia.
And let me add just that Juliet is on a team full of legendary women, expedition leaders, world champions, national champions, slalom paddlers, women who are the stunt doubles for Meryl Streep. I mean, just Hall of Fame women. And then there's
there's me.
God,
I was like the meathead.
And then on the men's side, imagine a whole ragtag bunch of guys who we all paddled slalom. So in the Olympics, you see the gates hanging over the river. That was some of us were raft guides in the summer. And so what we would say is, hey, I think if we can just cherry pick some of these really good paddlers, we can win this free trip to Chile and compete. And so it's all expense paid trip. And so we kind of tricked some of our slalom friends into going, and we're just thinking about just the opposite, like Bad News Bears versus like, the greatest women ever. And there's one race where we're going to come down and it's a head-to-head sprint. And the whole thing goes through a big class 5 rapid. And at the bottom of the rapid, there's a huge bus size hole feature, which is just the only goal is don't end up there. And what's so exciting about the race is that there's only one piece of water both boats can be on. And you need to not, be on the bad place. Otherwise, you're going to just end up in this moment of horror. So the day before, a couple days before, we're doing a training on with the women. It's very high. And lo and behold, we have scouted this rapid. The first time we run it, we scouted it from very high up, the men. So we look at it, we're like, yeah, don't go there. That's gnarly.
By the way, I just have to again interject. They scouted it from a road that was a mile up the river canyon.
It might have been a half
the
mile.
rapid looks like just a little bit of like crinkly water.
Like if you've ever been at the top of the Grand Canyon and then you try to if you're flying over an airplane over a small, country and you're like, yeah, let's not go over there. That's what it was like. So as we paddle down, the women pull over to scout. And that means they're going to look at the line, talk about what's fastest. And the boys are like, hey, let's just run it. We're not chicks. We know the line.
Yeah.
And a couple of us were like, well, I'm not sure that that's prudent. They're the best paddlers in the world. They've done this many times. And, so we charge in. And in 2 seconds, we are horribly offline. We are so offline. We float through the first lateral sideways. It's the size of a big wall. We barely make it over. Then we move into the next lateral. Remember, all these laterals are like hallways feeding you into the place you don't want to go. So you got to get through the wall. Otherwise, you end up in this bad spot. And in the second lateral, we flip. And it is a bad swim. And
just to, again, add in side note, they have flipped really quite a ways above the big part of the rapid. Like they aren't even at the big part of the rapid.
And one of the things that I had been doing, because I had identified Juliet as my queen and life partner, is that we were flirting a little bit. And the men, we used to keep our life jackets very loose because, you want to be able to move and rotate and you don't want to be encumbered by this stiff thing. And it's a sign of bravado. Look how confident I am. My life jacket's super loose. But if you've ever worn a life jacket and it's loose, you sink and the life jacket floats up over your face. It's not very effective. But meanwhile, the women who've raced all over the world and have had these horrific swims and terrible things, their PFDs are very, very tight. So I would go over and loosen Juliet's PFD, which is a total metaphor for our relationship. And she would, cover my butt by trying to make my life jacket tighter. And I'd be like, ha ha. So we have this terrible swim, and I'm pushed into the bottom of the river. And I'm like, oh my God, this is awful. And I come up and I take a big breath and then I swim into the hole. So I haven't even I'm basically on the water slide, getting my butt kicked, but haven't even hit the thing yet. And I get pushed to the bottom of the river and I'm bouncing on the bottom of the river and I'm being squeezed and my life jacket is all loose and I'm trying to tighten it up. And I'm getting this is one of the worst ass kickings I ever had. And I come up and I can see our $400 paddles floating away. Our boat is upside down. My friends have, pizzas for eyes. I mean, it's just saucer.
It was a yard
It's
sale.
a yard sale. It was a real ass whipping. And of course, Juliet paddles up with her friends. And all I remember is Juliet reaching out her hand to they've grabbed all our paddles, and then Juliet plucks me out of the river. And I was like, nailed it. This is it. I'm going to play the damsel in distress. She saved me. And now she thinks she's responsible for my safety and well-being for the rest of my life. And that's how we ended up here.
And you have been.
Facts.
Yes, facts.
Facts.
It has been a metaphor for our whole entire life.
I do tell Juliet all the time. I'm like, and that was the first time you saved my life. Just the first time.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, you guys are definitely a active sports couple, and you care so much about getting moving, but it's fun to see this side of your relationship. It's fun to see just the teasing, and I don't know, it just sounds like you had an awesome start, and what a great way to I don't know, just start a relationship in a place where you know that you're going to be active together and that you're going to stay that way. Because I think for so many couples, one person may get into health later in life and they may decide, oh, I want to be healthy now and my body doesn't feel so great, or maybe they go through a health issue, and one part of that couple decides I don't really want to drink alcohol, or I really want to get into a gym, or I want to start eating a specific way, and I really care about these things. But you guys got to start this way together from the foundational part of your relationship and build a family and life basically on top of that foundation. So beautiful to see, and to see how it's really continued throughout your marriage. How long have you guys been together?
We think we met on a leap day on the 29th of February. So it will be 23 years, married 20 years this year. So
congratulations.
thank you so much. Yeah. And I think you're right. Sorry to interject, but I think you're exactly right. I mean, I think it's so much of finding the right mate in life is honestly luck. But I think you're right that we did find each other at this moment in our lives. And we had some really core interests in playing and taking risks and being outside and using our bodies. And I think you're exactly right. I mean, I think you really hit the nail on the head. I think we really shared that deep value. We both had grown up doing outdoor sports and skiing and backpacking, camping. And, that's kind of we shared that in our childhoods and really valued that. And I think that has been a really sort of centering, connecting thing for us in our whole relationship. I think you're exactly right.
And I want to just add that one of the things that happens oftentimes is people meet other partners and there's not a lot of real stress. You don't have stress of providing for young people, caring for your parents, all of the craziness of the job, maybe a pandemic. And so you sort of meet each other really under ideal circumstances. And that certainly is a great way to start a lot of relationships, but it's hard to see how you will communicate and how you will contend with the potential ups and downs and stresses of being a human being in today's world. And one of the amazing things about seeing Juliet in that world was there's a lot of stress involved. We're sleeping in strange places in Chile. You were at a world championship. The risk of death is imminent. I have to see her compete.
Weird food.
I sort of got to see Juliet for who she really was. Was she able to be cheerful? How did she manage stress? How did she, prepare for the big day? How does she handle loss? How does she handle winning? And it was really an interesting sort of stress test. And, even for Juliet to get to that spot, one of the things that we share is that we were both river guides and kayak instructors. And from an earlier age, we were really comfortable with taking risk and being in charge and responsible for the health and well-being of everyone else. And so put all those things together, and I knew a lot about Juliet. I could infer a lot about how she was going to handle the stress of law school or the birth of our kids or having two businesses together. And in that so much that I think is one of the reasons that we, people say, how do you work together? We're like, well, we've been doing this a long time and really have to trust each other and have been trusting each other in a really chaotic environment, outside of the, demands of everyday life. Plus, we're both very comfortable with sort of what it looks like to work ourselves. So many things we got right. And again, pattern recognition, nailed it. I'll just take full credit. Juliet would have been like, whatever. She went home first. I bought like $30 worth of pesos and I just shoved them into the payphone and started, calling Juliet from Chile.
Well, and also just for your listeners, if they want to look up Kelly, what he looks like now. When I met him, he had his hair dyed white blonde.
World Championships.
He was 45 pounds smaller.
40 pounds.
40 pounds smaller. So, he looked very different.
Oh my gosh. Well, I will say back to what you were saying, Kelly, what you're explaining is a level of trust that is, goes beyond just how are we as individual humans and how do we relate to very extreme situations, which allows for you to understand how she's going to deal with all these things like you talked about, a pandemic, birthing your children, being an entrepreneur. You're Dr. Kelly, you're a physical therapist, you built private practice, you've had all the books come out and all of that. Like that is stressful on its own. And there are ups and downs of having an entrepreneurial life. But to have someone who has full trust in your ability to move through that and to know that if you need a little help, she'll just pluck you out of the water and help you out. Like that type of teamwork is so admirable. Looking at your career as a physical therapist, you've worked with pro athletes, pilots, teachers. You have an online platform, you have readers of your book, me being one of them. What was it like to build this private practice or work as a physical therapist and share your work? And how is it different from a lot of physical therapists out there?
Well, one of the things early on is that Juliet and I loved to train together. And so we both, even when I was, first year physio student, Juliet was supporting the process. We trained together before grad school. And, we've both been on sort of this journey of how do we fit it all in? And especially, knowing Juliet through law school and as an attorney, really getting a firsthand glimpse of, wow, there's not a lot of time. And how are we going to fit this in? So we became realists very early. And when I presented sort of some of the early thinking around CrossFit, I was like, Juliet, check this out. We started tinkering with this. She was like, hey, I think you need to go kind of explore this a little bit more. My birthday present was she sent me to the level 1 course back in 2004.
Yeah.
And so a million years ago, almost 20 years ago, Juliet and I kind of saw that there was this opportunity. And then we also were planning that, what was I going to do after physio school? And Juliet had no intentions of leaving the law practice. She was on her way to being a partner. She was already a senior associate. Her track was there. Mm-hmm. And, this wellness fitness space didn't exist, really didn't. There were a few people holding, but Mark's Daily Apple was just an idea. It was a blog. Yeah. I just think that people forget that, as a metaphor, when we early on in our business, we had everything on Yahoo Business, and people and our young staff from millennials would be like, why are you on Yahoo? Because we're like, we started this business before there was even Google.
Yeah, we were like, Gmail didn't start till 2010. FYI. Like everyone thinks it was there forever, but it wasn't.
It hasn't been.
Yeah.
So, and one of the things that we discovered, when we started to see this, it was my second year of physio school, and we took out an extra student loan. And Juliet's law practice money, we started a gym. And the idea was we love training. And we thought, well, maybe we can just get some experience and set ourselves up for some kind of thing that happens after physio school. And we opened the 21st CrossFit gym in the world. So imagine that I'm a full-time grad student. We have a baby. We have a law practice and a gym. And, they say if you want to get something done, give it to a busy woman. And which is the truth.
But let me paint the picture a little bit too. I think also it was like we wanted a place to train, but I will say that we felt like we were at the very beginning of something emergent with CrossFit. Like we had that feeling. Like we sort of we felt like, you know what, if we don't start an affiliate now, we're going to miss this wave. And it turns out, of course, we could have started it many years later and been on the wave, but we did have this sort of sense that there was like something emergent about the whole CrossFit phenomenon that we wanted to be like on that train.
Mhm.
And well, I don't know what my point was there, but it did feel, it felt like we were part of something emergent.
And I'll say that we, in the time, remember it's back in 2005, we didn't set out to write books or make courses. We set out to serve our community and serve our friends. And that
Right.
was really this. I think we've lost that narrative a little bit because social media says you need to have this global audience and what's your reach and SEO and
Yeah.
right. So Juliet and I set out and and today I think even as when we come back to the book, I think we felt like the magic of the universe and real transformation society is the functional unit of the family, and then the loose associations of the families and the neighborhoods. That's really where we can make change, where you can influence the people that you interact with. You can become that power node. So we just became a node in San Francisco in our community, and we didn't set out to do any other thing. And then lo and behold, word gets out and you make a blog and then a video and you just keep serving the people you serve. And it's sort of like growth by 1,000 cuts. And, it wasn't very sexy. I would teach and then come sleep on my treatment table and then coach the 5:30 a.m. class. We managed having a second baby in 2008. And ultimately, sort of through this stepwise growth, I think what happened was we saw a real opportunity to help people understand what was going on with their bodies in a way that wasn't, because classic strength and conditioning was becoming very sophisticated at the time. We were starting to see sort of different groups talk to each other. Gymnasts were talking to Olympic lifters, were talking to sprinters, powerlifting. We're seeing this real mixing and iterative nature of what strength and conditioning was, and the access to people. When we started our gym, you couldn't buy a kettlebell in San Francisco. We had to drive to Santa Cruz to buy kettlebells. So that's how far the world has come. And then simultaneously, as we saw this great opportunity, we took the next risk, but it just felt like stepwise. So I would say is my work today, I was at a big conference this week. It feels very much the same thing that we've been doing for almost 20 years.
But I would like to add a couple things. The first is that I don't mean to pat ourselves on the back, but I'm going to, because we were the first people that I am aware of who brought a physical therapy clinic into a gym. There may have been like the odd physical therapist or massage therapist at like a big Globo gym back in the day.
Texas was doing it. A few other people
were doing it, but we, at least in the CrossFit community, were the first people to say, hey, like this should all be under one roof. Like Kelly's a physical therapist. He has people at the gym who are coming to us with nagging pain and injuries and, mobility issues and general stiffness. And then we're sending them to his, because he did have a regular physical therapy job.
Also had to coach. That was the difference too. Yeah. It wasn't just like, hey, we're going to put a separate business in our office, that there was no discernment between who the coach was and who the physio was.
Yeah. And I think that was one of the things that was so innovative about it is that there was this sort of expectation that all of our physios really deeply understood movement and mechanics and actually could connect people actually moving and actually doing things to the things that they were doing on the treatment table, which I think was unique, right? In most cases, it's like it's siloed, right? Like you're injured, you go lay on the treatment table at PT and they do some things to you, and then you go to the gym as a separate thing. And so I think we did a really good job of kind of integrating those and bringing up some physios in that environment. I'm going to try to answer a sub part of your question for Kelly, which is that he definitely took a different path. I mean, there weren't a lot of, we were early on in the cash-based physical therapy practice. It's become a lot more popular these days, and there were people doing it back then, but I mean, we really just did it out of necessity because it was just two of us and we were like, we don't have time or bandwidth. And I'm still working as a lawyer to bill insurance and have a more traditional physical therapy practice. And so we did it out of necessity, but we also, started a cash-based physical therapy practice and realized that there is a cohort of people who, want to get better and are willing to pay out of pocket to do, to get that kind of work on their bodies. And then I don't want to speak for Kelly, but I think he has like a strange relationship with physical therapy as a whole. I think he's been on the cutting edge a lot, and he's been so public about his thinking and methods, obviously the books. But when you do that, you also become a target, as everybody knows, right? Like right when you start sort of putting your ideas out there in the world, then, you become a target. So I think, physios, there's many physios who literally went to physical therapy school because of becoming a Supple Leopard and Kelly's work. And then I think there's some more traditional physios who feel a little so about Kelly. So I think his experience in the physio community has been mixed.
Let me just add
Yeah.
in before we move on. One of the dangerous ideas of Supple Leopard was that we wanted to shift this loci of control back to the person. And we saw that we had a bunch of tools that could restore position and inadvertently help people have less discomfort. And we knew that we were affecting the brain, and there was a lot of things, and that pain was complicated and complex. But we said one of the things that you can control is your environment. One of the things you can control is how well you move and how well the tissue systems operate. So shifting that back also, I think, was an existential threat for some populations that were their livelihoods were based on people not having the tools to fix themselves, and then waiting till they got so banged up or so beat up that they needed this relationship. Hey, put the fire out. I'm on fire. Put the fire out. And we started to recognize that the same conversations we were having around sports and performance could be retooled to actually help people have stronger feet and full hip flexion and fix themselves. And I think that really is the central idea of who owns what, because what we were saying forever was that as long as you worked harder, that was good, but no one owned position. And pain is a medical problem. And that really is disingenuous, because we were just basically turning people over to solve pain however they wanted. Bourbon, THC, the opiate crisis, all of that. We were just basically saying, yeah, pain's not our training problem. And Juliet and I stepped in and we're like, hang on, who owns that? And I think that potentially murkied the water for a little bit for a lot of people, because they didn't understand where our loyalties were. And we were ultimately users fighting for the users.
Right. Well, I mean, it just you can call yourself a functional physio, because if you look at it, it's like all the functional MDs who go, oh, well, let's get to the root cause of the problem, and let me give you some tools to empower yourself, and let me give you some exercises, or like here are some, you know, just people that can support you to empower you to better yourself, and whether that's learning to cook in your kitchen or getting in the habit of working out or like locking in your sleep hygiene, all of those things. I mean, that's why traditional MDs can get really frustrated, because they're siloed. They're siloed and they're handcuffed by their, the reimbursements from whatever the insurance code is that they're billing. They have zero flexibility. They have 14 years of school to pay off, and they're going to defend all of that time and effort. And I think it's just, I think it really, if someone was inspired by you to go back to school, there are doctors who have probably followed Mark Hyman's work and they're inspired by Mark. They're going to go be a functional MD, and they're not going to identify with the silo that they're putting themselves in, or that specialty. They're going to really get to root cause and empower their patients. And that's what you did in the physio space. And I mean, I know personally, as soccer player with multiple knee surgeries, and what it looks like to get cut up, go to a physio, have some electric stim, then take myself to the 24-hour fitness, get on the Stairmaster, work out with a trainer. My knees probably dipping in, my knees might be going over my toes. And then I'm still having the same pain that I had when it's like, if I don't know how I'm incorrectly moving, and my PT is helping to fix the problem, but then my trainer isn't identifying the pattern that I'm repeating over and over and over again that's causing pain. It's just as siloed as going to a gastro, going to an endo, going to a GYN and saying like, oh, this entire problem is from this one root cause, but no one's talking about blood sugar. And so your hormones are messed up and you have PCOS and your thyroid's overworked. Like we all need to talk together. And I think that
that was at the time you started your business is scary for people who go to school, they spend the money, they spend the time, they go the traditional route, and then they're like, he's telling me what I'm doing is wrong. You're not. You were just saying, hey, I just want to help people. And that's what you've been doing for 20 years. I very much appreciate the work that you've done, just like the functional MDs that have inspired me so much to do this. Because it's what you do. You know, you can't, we all just want to be better. And as the client or the patient or the person in pain, you're like, hey, I just want answers. Like, can someone just help me so that I can run after my kids and not hurt? And so that's what I loved for so long about what you've, I want to say preached, but like shared, taught, whatever, is there's an environment, there's tools, you know, there is a connection in your tissues. There are things that people do over and over and over again, whether it's their hips or their feet or their back, and so that's why what you're here to talk about. And you're here to talk about your new book, which is so exciting, Built to Move. But yeah, I guess that's just how I feel about you guys.
Can I just say a couple things about what you said? I mean, first of all, I've never actually heard the phrase functional physio. So TM to you, you may have just made that up, but I actually think that that's so correct. And I think the other, and just hearing about your own experience with your own, knee injuries, for example, in soccer, I think what you experience is what so many people experience, which is they go to a really talented, their surgery or whatever, they go to a really talented physio who's able to get them through that like post-surgery acute phase very well. Like they're very adept at doing that. And then those same people are transitioned out of formal physical therapy and
no one pays for it anymore.
No one pays for it. And then, often people then move on to a personal trainer or a coach or some kind of, physical person, but that person has never been trained to understand, in many cases, and that's changing, I would say, in many cases hasn't been trained to really truly understand movement and mechanics and how to train injured athletes. And so there's kind of this gap, right? Like, the physio can get you to like 60%, but someone like you who's been a serious athlete and wants to use your body and be physical, you want to get to 100%. And it's that last like 40% that, that's where we've been trying to work. And that's why we try to create these physio coaches where, it's like, okay, our physios at our gym could work with an acute patient post-surgery, but that really wasn't where our forte was. Our forte was, okay, you've gotten through the 6-week acute phase and like, we're here to get you from 60% to 100%. And that was kind of our mission. And I thought you did such a great job of sort of pulling it all together with functional physio, which I may steal from you, but I'll give you full credit, TM.
It's all yours. So, well, let's talk about some of those problems, whether it's someone's environment or the way that they're moving or a tissue issue that you see over and over and over again, that come up with your athletes, that come up with your clients, that come up with your friends. I know you can spot gait issues from a mile away. Like, it's embarrassing to think about walking in front of Kelly. He's going to be like, what is she doing?
No.
You're not wrong. You're not wrong, Kelly.
We keep in mind that we inherited some language that was less effective from our predecessors.
Yeah.
And we're trying to restore people and expand their ability to have movement solutions. We think that the human being is very durable, but we need to cover some basics. And so one of the things that I think you brought up a little bit is that we have worked in high performance for almost 2 decades now. And we get access to a lot of dirty laundry and a lot of data. So whether that's working at a scale of the US Army or big federal agencies or universities or national teams, the English national soccer team operates in a very specific way. The 49ers operate in a specific way. We are invited in to help them untangle this Gordian knot of, we want to win, we want to be more durable, and we want our people to leave more intact, right? How do we manage that? And how do we do that in the best way? So Juliet and I love high performance. It's super fun. It's
sexy. It's sexy.
It is. And we get to work along with some very, very bright men and women who are like, we actually love coaches and organizations more than we love working with players. We just think that that's really an interesting place to make change. But we've always felt like we learned this early in the gym, was that, hey, we were going to some of the best high performance coaches in the world in specific sports to understand training and say, hey, this is the best way to teach Olympic lifting, or this is a good way to teach Olympic lifting, because we could see what was essential for a beginner and how those skills could be progressed all the way up to going to the Olympics. So, and we work at the Olympics with Olympic lifters, the Olympics, so we can see all the way back. I'm working with my daughters and what's a foundational movement that I can continue to build on if they wanted to go do this thing. So what we came out of that for us was really looking at high performance as a lab, where we could, a test kitchen, a teaching hospital, where we could say, hey, here is how these people eat and how they've solved these problems. And shouldn't we be able to take those laboratory experiments that we're running and actually apply them to us mortals, so that sport could just not be entertainment, but it also could be a living lab that indicated, just like when we met, how we might be more durable and what the best practices are and how we're going to work those practices into our life. And that's really where we've been going for the last, chunk, especially last decade. We spent a lot of time around Supple Leopard saying, here's how you can improve your position, here's how you can restore your mechanics. And our objective measurements were range of motion and output. Can you go faster? And now 10 years later, we're saying, okay, we need to expand that conversation into what do you do day to day? And if high performance isn't your goal, can we take those lessons and just help you figure out how you can feel better and occupy your role in your family a little more effectively?
And I would just add that we've already talked about the siloed situation. And, I think the health and fitness industry may win the prize of being the most siloed. We have done a really great job of making those of us who identify as athletes and have a personal interest or passion for this stuff, we've all gotten better and more sophisticated. We're seeing functional medicine doctors. We're wearing Oura rings. We're sauning. We're taking the right supplements. We're exercising. We're doing it all. Like, we are checking the boxes. But we're like 0.01% of people still. We think because we're in this world and that's who we follow on Instagram that everybody is like us, but we're not. And if you look at the data out there in the world, like our friend Anthony Veneri from Fit Insider just posted this map of, in 3 generations, the obesity epidemic has like quadrupled. Kids aren't eating any vegetables. If you look at every metric of health in our country, it's getting worse and worse. Diabetes and diabesity and stress and depression. We're not really doing well. And so I think we in the health and fitness business have become so siloed that we've sort of like left everybody else behind.
And if our fitness, if the industry is the test, it's the lab, it's where we're trying to make change in our societies, it's not working very well.
And I think the other thing is we haven't, as a group, collectively come in and said, okay, well, we may have time to do these things because this is in the industry in which we work and we can prioritize these things. But like, most people don't. And I think one of the things that was so helpful to us in writing this book is that we happen to live in this really tight suburban community in Northern California. It's kind of like Pleasantville. And we know our neighbors and we know our neighbors' kids. And, it starts to feel like, even though it's not, it starts to feel like a very small town. And our friends and larger community here are people who I would describe as people who care about their health and they want to be durable and they want to be able to play with their grandkids and use their bodies. But they could literally care less if they have a 6-pack. They could care less if they have the perfect body composition. They do want to be able to have a glass of wine with their friends on the weekend and go out to a nice restaurant. So while they care about their health, they're not extreme. And the other thing they care about a lot is they are all just dealing with nagging injury, pain. Sometimes it's kind of the kind of pain they can just work through and keep doing what they love, but sometimes it sidelines them. So it's like if tennis is the thing they love, they can't do that. And so we started really getting, and it's, I think because we're parents in the small community, we really started being able to get out of our own silo of like real serious health and fitness and wellness people and start to see the challenges that the people in our greater community were having. And again, the key point is these people do care about their health. They're not couch potatoes. They care, they want to be durable. But they're totally confused. And we have fire hosed them with information as an industry, and they don't know what diet to follow, how much to exercise, what exercise to do, how they don't even know that they might be able to take a crack at dealing with their nagging pain at home. I mean, there's just a lot of confusion. So I think that was between that sort of combination of what Kelly was talking about, which is this perspective we have from working with high level athletes, combined with this day-to-day life among people who, that sort of second avatar I mentioned, this is where we've sort of tried to say, okay, how can we expand all this knowledge that we've been lucky enough to be part of because we happen to land in this industry to more people. So, that was kind of the thinking here.
I can't tell you how much I appreciate that. I mean, being in the wellness industry, I can easily get sucked up into the biohacking world and then find myself turning around and sharing something on Instagram that may not be resonating with my community of, you know, young moms and dads who are kind of in the thick of it with their kids, fighting about sugar at a birthday party. And I'm like, this is how long you should be sauning, or this is exactly how long you should be. And they're like, intermittent fasting. Like, my kid had goldfish out at 6 a.m. this morning, or whatever the case may be. But it is, I mean, you just can't we can't speak to ourselves. It really has to be like you're taking the biggest needle movers from these professional athletes and the things you've seen in the lab. And you're also taking your personal experience from your community and saying, what do they really care about? They care about being able to still play tennis. They care about not, being able to move with their kids and not having a heart attack and feeling as like their 100, not an athlete's 100. So let's talk about this awesome new book and what are these physical practices and how can we understand if we're, I know you talk about 10 tests in the book and 10 physical practices, but it's a short enough list that it feels manageable and exciting and not overwhelming or paralyzing. So what are they?
In the pandemic, we saw that a lot of people became comfortable with increasing their vital signs. They could look at SaO2 and respiration rate, and they're talking about viral load. And we suddenly were like, oh, look, people can expand. And if you ask anyone, is 120/80 good blood pressure? They're like, no, it's a place where you don't just need to start caring a little more.
It's a benchmark.
And one of the things that we felt like in Supple Leopard was that we had all of these range of motion benchmarks, range of motion vital signs that were built into the language of strength and conditioning. So I've taught on every continent except Antarctica, and everyone knows what a push-up is. Yeah. And a push-up is a very explicit range of motion of the shoulder. So we have this universal language. And what we thought we should do is say, hey, let's create some vital signs. Let's create some benchmarks for people to understand where they are. So it's not good or bad, but hey, here's what we expect. You should expect your body to be able to do. And if you happen to be struggling with one of those, it may be because you've done a lot of travel, or you just ran a marathon, or no one's ever said it's important. And when that happens, when you have an objective measurement, you can start to say, and appreciate that there are some, hey, I'm below this, or I'm above this, I'm doing well on this. And it helps you to take control of the behavior. We chose these 10 because we found that they were essential in our own lives, and we found them to be the biggest movers of the needle. But also we found that these behaviors tend to stack and influence each other. So for example, we're huge fans of walking. And we found that if people, from our work in some of the elite military units, if people walked more, they were more likely to be fatigued enough to fall asleep, and that they slept better. And so one of the cures that we've had for chronic pain and persistent pain and sleep disturbance and disordered sleep is walking more. And so now we can say, instead of just saying walk more, we can say, hey, here's sort of a minimum. And if you find yourself below that, you might need to focus on a little bit more in your life. And that's a good example of how we're thinking about these behaviors, sort of physical behaviors, range of motion, and sort of some other might be soft behaviors that people might not think about as creating some minimum standards for people.
So what are the minimum standards that you have for walking?
Well, we recommend 8,000 to 12,000 steps in the book. And the interesting thing is the 10,000 steps thing was actually sort of a marketing ploy by this pedometer company in the 60s.
But 10,000 is an auspicious Japanese number. Maybe last 10,000 years on side. That's what that's about.
Right. But since then, there has been a massive amount of peer-reviewed, high-quality research that has shown that the more you walk, the longer you live, and the less chronic illness you suffer. So, I mean, whether it's 8 or 10 or 12, what we know is that the average American is walking something like 3,000 steps a day. And one of the reasons we chose 8 versus 10 as the minimum is that there's also research out there to show that if people just put a little effort into it, most people actually can reach 8,000. So we wanted to choose a number that felt attainable for people. Going from 3,000 to 10,000 is maybe too much of a stretch for people. So great. I mean, if people want to walk 12,000 or 16,000 steps a day, like more power to them. But we wanted to choose a number that we felt like would have health benefits and was also attainable. So we say the minimum is 8 to 10 to 12 to, if you have more time, any amount is great.
Everyone has a step counter built in. It's your phone. And most people are having their phone. And your kids, I guarantee you, have their phones with them all the time. Open up their Apple Health and look at how much they're moving. On a rainy day, you're going to be horrified. And so what we can begin to say is, what are the best practices or what are good practices that support the well-being of the human being? So if you want to have strong feet, you better load your feet. If you want to decongest and just move the lymphatics, that's all driven on muscle contraction. And if you've ever had cankles after a long flight, that's you failing to contract the muscles of your lower limb and the fluid congesting down in your ankles. That's one of the reasons we want you to walk more. We want you to circulate, dump those waste and lymphatic tissues, and accumulate enough non-exercise activity that you fall asleep. So you can start to see that the systems, this one thing starts to influence a whole lot of other things.
Well, plus there's all of these side benefits of walking. The first thing is most people do it outside. I mean, we're also fans of treadmill walking if that's what's available to you. So like no shade on treadmill walking. Any walking is great, but it's like it gets people a chance to get outside. So reasonable. I know. And get a little sunlight on your body. I mean, just like have some direct exposure to sun for a short amount of time. And then I think the other huge thing in this world of, stress and depressed, I just was driving into the office today, listening to an NPR story about how much of a struggle teenagers are having right now. I think it's like, something like 60% of them report feeling depressed and like 20% of them have suicidal thoughts. So, I mean, our teenagers and our youth are not doing well right now. And COVID really, did a number on that particular subset of kids as well. But one of the things that we know is helpful for loneliness and depression is actually interacting in person with other humans. And we think walking is one of the best ways to do that. I mean, it's, we often walk together, walk with our friends. So it's like the full package. You clear out your lymphatic system, you move your body, you get your joints out of 90-degree angles, you get some non-exercise activity so you can sleep, you create community, you get some sunlight on your body. Like, it's amazing. We're such fans of walking, and it's really not sexy on Instagram, but we're trying to make it sexy.
It's great. It's realistic.
If you're elite, put a backpack on. It's called rucking. And I guarantee you, your little 10-minute walk after dinner wearing a 40-pound pack, that will change your feet. You'll be like, wow, my feet are weak sauce.
Yeah. Talk to me about loading your feet and what does that look like? Because I was envisioning having to, do like split squats with like weights on my shoulders.
You can go ahead. You carry on.
Yeah.
Split squats are the dream.
Kelly loves a split squat.
So, one of the things that we start to see is we're talking about how do you create a durable body?
Right.
That means bad stuff's going to happen to you. This morning, this is a definite booze problem. It's raining. I'm walking out to turn on the sauna early. Maybe our geriatric cat is screaming at us at 5:45. And I'm like, well, might as well turn on the sauna. And Juliet's like, do it. So I walk out and I trip and my left foot slips into the pool. And I go down so hard onto the concrete. Like the worst case scenario, I'm blind. I don't have coffee. I'm freezing in my underwear outside and I trip on the concrete. bad things are going to happen to you. You're going to get disease. You're going to get injured. Something is coming your way. And we want to create as much capacity to buffer that as we can. Simultaneously, if I think we are looking at creating a good business, you would say, hey, here's my quarterly goal, or here's my year-end goal, and here's my 5-year goal. And you would work backwards. We do it with savings and retirement, but we don't do it with thinking about how we want our bodies to move. We always think that that future version of ourselves is going to be more motivated and have more time, right? They'll have better discipline. I'm going to eat this cake, but tomorrow I won't want the cake. I know that's the case. So one of the things that we can do is start to say, well, where are the big roadblocks for a lot of people? And what we start to see is balance goes down. Fall risk when you're in your 70s is the number one way to kill yourself. You fall, you break your hip, you lose your ability to move, you lose muscle mass because you're in the hospital.
You can't live independently.
You can't live independently. You don't see your friends. It's gnarly. So if getting up and down off the ground, if fall risk, if balance are those things, well, how then, as a 50-year-old man who loves to train hard, where do I put this foot strength, balance, awareness into my day-to-day life so that you don't say to me, well, Kel, I think you need to go take a 1-hour balance class. I'm like, no, I'm going to go deadlift and sprint. Like, that's way more interesting to me. But I need to be thinking about having some benchmarks in this, and some like, holy moly, my ankles were stiff. I didn't know, and I couldn't do this. So where can we do those things? That really is the magic. And a simple test, for example, is we love this thing called the old man balance test, developed by our friend Chris Henshaw. And he developed this test so he could beat his kids at something.
Okay.
And all I want you to do, and again, one of the things that Juliet and I are really trying to do, and we've become much more realists of, is and I learned this early on, you'll like this from the biohacking days. I think early on, I was like, Juliet, look, here's a list of 20 things we can do to optimize and biohack. And she's like, I'm a busy working mother. Like, you can just go to hell with that list of like things I need to do. I'm never going to get that done. Are you adding 20 more things to my, right?
Yeah.
But it turns out one of the things you'll do every day is put your shoes on. You'll put your shoes and socks on. You will do that. And so all we want you to do is stand on one foot, and then not put the other foot down. Reach down, grab a sock. Don't put your foot down, put the sock on. Reach down, grab your shoe. Don't put your foot down, put your shoe on. You've just engaged in over a minute of gnarly dynamic balance training that you can do every single time you put your shoes and socks on. And then guess what? Rinse, wash, repeat a decade, and you'll slay it.
I mean, this is the kind of stuff where it becomes a trigger and a habit and something that you do. And
your kids can
blink 10 years later. Yeah.
You don't have to go to a balance class.
I mean, I literally I put my shoes and socks on using the old man balance test every single day. Like Kelly, actually, I was in the garage and he's like, oh, look at you doing the old man balance test. But I do it every day now. It's just like become the way I put on my shoe. I'm like, oh, this is how I do it. And, usually sometimes that's even twice a day, right? Because if I exercise and change, so it's like, I've gotten like 3 minutes of balance practice in and I didn't have to go to a balance class.
All right, I promise I'm going to do it for like the next 6 weeks. But then when the belly's too big, I might just have to tap out and sit down or have Chris tie my shoes for me.
You get a pass. You get a pass in like the second and third trimester of pregnancy.
For sure. If you take any of these practices and then just turn and look at your kids and say, whoa, are my kids able to do these practices? I think we can start to pick up things early on and then adjust, because I think the problem is we get this mission creep as parents and as busy working entrepreneurs where you're just like, I'm doing it, I'm surviving, and my body's so durable, I'm getting by.
Right.
One of the reasons when we're working with people with back pain or chronic pain or persistent pain or after surgery, we make them track their sleep because we don't believe that they're going to be, that they're actually doing what they say they're doing. And it's so easy to get this sleep now. And then as soon as they start tracking, they start making different decisions because what gets measured gets managed. So early on with some of these tests, we found out that if we could just bring them to consciousness and then people could apply them, lo and behold, we saw that they ended up doing the right thing. And sometimes that's about environmental constraint. Something we talked about with Rob Wolf in his first book, The Paleo Solution, was, I was like, if you don't want to eat cookies, don't buy cookies. And I have to do that. And now I have this daughter who's
Kelly
a baker.
loves cookies.
I love cookies. And if I don't go out and buy a bunch of cookies, I'm not going to eat a bunch of cookies. Otherwise, I will eat the cookie. So
All of them.
what we try to do is say, well, how can we set up your environment so you don't have to make another choice? You don't have to have another act of will. You don't have to have, have the discipline. Like I'm like, discipline is not putting it in your way in the first place, or discipline is setting yourself up so that you can do the right thing at the right time for the right reason. And you didn't have to, journal about it and meditate so that you could sit on the floor. That's what we're trying to get, is that you can do all of these things without having to majorly overturn your life.
Yes. Willpower is systems.
Yes.
I feel like when so many times I have clients who are like, I can't, because I am in this stage where a lot of my clients have kids and kids food around and Girl Scout cookies right now or whatever it is. And they're like, I don't want to deprive my kids, but I like always eat my kids' food. And, the question and thing I bring up to them is like, are you supposed to have the willpower? Like if someone's a recovering alcoholic, I wouldn't say like head to the bar and get yourself a soda or a sparkling water. Like why are we tempting ourselves when we really have goals? Like it's all about the environment. It's about making those triggers easy and saying, I wake up, I walk into the kitchen, I always turn my coffee off. I moved my supplements to above my coffee because I wasn't taking them in my medicine cabinet.
Right.
And I see them above my coffee. I'm waiting for my coffee and I'm like, okay, well then I have to get a glass of water because now I have to take my supplements and they're sitting it and the coffee's dripping. And here I am taking my supplements now when I want to, because I've
And
set
drinking a
up the
glass of water first
environment.
thing. That's right.
You're setting up the environment to do it and trigger you to do it instead of opening the cabinet and being like, ooh, the caramel delights. Because I, like you, Kelly, will eat the entire sleeve. So
that's what it is. It's a sleeve. It's a functional unit of measure.
It's like, and I don't think that I'm a bad person because of that. I'm just like, I will recognize the fact that is a highly palatable, highly processed food, and my brain's 4th of July fireworks. And I'm not just going to ask myself to say no to that a million times. I'm going to set up systems and boundaries so that my kids can enjoy something. And so then we can say goodbye to it so that they're not having to say no over and over and over again. And neither am I.
One of the things that I think Juliet is a level 2 precision nutrition coach. She's sort of been into the weeds and sort of handled that aspect of our gym life. And I always was like, gross. Like, I don't want to, I have all these like super nerdy friends who are into nutrition, and there's like 300 rails there, and personal identity politics get wrapped in it. Mm-hmm. But I had to become competent in the fundamentals of nutrition if I was going to talk about your tissue health and making sure you had the building blocks on board and that you weren't making this inflammatory problem more difficult. And again, I think when I was a young physio, I remember being in school and I'd work next to the occupational therapist who would be working with people who had had strokes and cerebrovascular accidents and head trauma. And they may have one side that was highly involved, so that they didn't use their left hand anymore, for example. Mm-hmm. And what they would do is they would actually put on an oven mitt on the opposite hand and force that hand to work. They'd make the less effective hand will do all of the work, right? They'd really struggle, this deep practice, instead of just defaulting towards what's easy. I'm so exhausted at the end of the day. What is it I have around, And I think one of the things we took away from that early on, I remember coming home to Juliet and I was like, whoa, how do we apply that thinking to movement, to choice, to agency, to, and if you don't want your kids on the phone before they go to bed, you have to take their phones. You can't say, oh, we modulate, it's just, here's the heroin, put it next to, here's the crack, don't touch it. You have to be like, oh, there's no phones. Everyone leaves their phone in the kitchen or something. You have to engage in some kind of thing. Otherwise it's impossible. So how can we further constrain ourselves? And one of the things that I'm really like about our nutrition recommendations in here is that most adults are not coming to us because they have nutrition. I'm not feeling well for my triathlon, Kelly, although once in a while that happens in our high sport, right? How do I maximize my glycogen loading? People are like, I want to feel less gross. I want to be less fat. It's body composition 101. And what we found over 10 years of watching all our expert friends was that we were seeing lots of strategies not really work. Like, intermittent fasting, that works, that's your jam, cool. But we were always like, hey, you're missing a huge window to eat a fruit and vegetable and have a protein. And when I look at your minimums, when you do an intermittent fasting style diet, we see that you actually don't hit enough micronutrients in fruits and vegetables, and you don't get enough macronutrients. You're not getting enough protein.
Mhm.
And then you're starving in the evening and you're eating a pint of ice cream. So we can talk about other strategies, but this one strategy that you've employed to fool yourself into not eating doesn't seem to be hitting the minimums. So what we've tried to do is say, let's say that it doesn't matter how you want to get there. Show us you're getting enough protein. Show us you're getting enough fruits and vegetables. Now it's up to you to fit your crazy life into those benchmarks.
Well, and I would just add to it. I mean, this is obviously your area of expertise and what you live. But I agree with Kelly that, most people do have kind of a body composition goal, and that's why they start dieting. But I also think it's really important that most people don't have their body composition goal isn't like lean and jacked. Like
Yeah.
most people don't, they want to be at a healthy weight, which there is a gigantic broad range of what that means.
Yeah.
They want to feel good, and they want to be able to do the things that bring them joy. In many cases, that is enjoying a nice dinner with friends and not being a weirdo about not eating or eating weird stuff. They maybe want to have, the occasional alcoholic drink. I mean, so it's like, that's what people that, we know and work with in our own lives really care about. And I think that's another way where we as the fitness industry is sort of, again, lost the forest through the trees. Like, yes, people do care about their body composition, but maybe not in the way we think. Like, we don't need shredded, they don't want to have or care to have shredded abs. And they don't care about that. They want to feel good. They want to feel like they're at a healthy weight that can support their movement and, longevity goals, whatever those may be. And they want to also not cut out all the fun in their life.
They just don't want to be uncomfortable. They want to wear their favorite jeans and they want to hang with their girlfriends. Yep.
Exactly.
And we're both turning 50 this year, and we have a lot of friends who've gotten their first blood panel back where the doctor was like, "Oh, your blood sugar is really high.
Yeah.
You're pre-diabetic." And they're like, "What?" And then they come to us, and Juliet and I will say things like, "Well, hey, tell us about what a day looks like for you. Like, let us understand." And they're like, "Well, they go through their thing." We're like, "And how do you calm down at the night? What do you engage in any, yeah, I drink a bottle of wine a night or 2 bottles of wine a night." We're like, "You drink 2 bottles of wine a night? Like, what's that about?" "Well, I'm so stressed. I can't hit the brakes when I get home." Okay, well, that's not an issue of, drink less wine, that'll solve your problems. It's an issue of we haven't given you the tools to be able to hit the brakes. And the only way that drinking 2 bottles of wine isn't working for you is that your doctor said you're pre-diabetic. And that's
Right.
a little bit like waiting till the engine light comes on in the car. It's a little bit, we have to do a much better job of showing people how these essential behaviors can be integrated into their life so that we can have the next conversation. And by the way, these are the same behaviors that Juliet and I go out into the world with, and we're like, "Oh, you want to win a world championship? You have to do this. If you want to win a gold medal, you have to do all 10 of these things and have all 10 of these things." So I think sometimes people forget that the coin is two-sided, and that this one side is for the rest of us, but the other side of the coin is the basis for human performance.
And yeah, just to really emphasize that, like, it is a myth that the high performers that we know are getting they're getting perfect scores on all these vital signs. They're not. I mean, we've actually, this book has started to get out in the world, and it's been largely to more of our athletic high performance people who are in that 1%. We talked about the silo of health and fitness professionals, and, they may be, getting 5 good scores on 5, but without a doubt, they're all like, "Oh, I had a total blind spot in this part, and I had a total blind spot here." And
I don't eat fruits and vegetables.
yeah, and so,
I don't sleep.
so
I don't walk.
just to like debunk the notion that all the high performers we work with are checking all the boxes. They're not. This is universal. Like these habits and practices are universal, and it's what we recommend to literally everyone. Not just the 45-year-old mom of 3, right? Like
Right.
It's to everyone.
Can you do high level what those 10 things are? People can get the details in your book, Built to Move, but just so that we have a general idea, other than walking. And you
So
can,
again,
I'm like, is it
Yeah.
nutrition or is it protein, fruits, and vegetables as
Yeah,
3
yeah.
other ones?
I mean, I'll, before you tee it up, I would say we sort of it's almost divided. Like half of the vital signs are more movement based,
Yeah.
and half of them are more lifestyle based.
Great.
So we have nutrition, sleep, balance, walking, creating a movement rich environment,
Which is also about minimizing your sedentariness.
And then the movement related ones are squatting, getting up off the floor, being able to put your arms over your head, being able to have hip extension. I feel like I'm missing one key one in here, but that's really how to think about it. It's both this sort of series of lifestyle behaviors and a series of movement related behaviors that we think come together. And one thing I do want to add, we specifically did not want to make an exercise book. And so exercise is actually on purpose, not one of the vital signs. And to those who would say, oh, well, how could you leave exercise out? We don't. We obviously are exercisers and we're fans, and we do prioritize it and make time to do it in our lives in many myriad ways.
But that's not a physical practice.
But we don't think it's a physical practice. And also we think that, the one thing the health industry has done a great job of is letting people know they should exercise. Now, whether or not they do is another thing, but that message check, like people know they should exercise whether they do or not. And the reasons why they don't, it is complicated, and again, environmentally related and community related, and it's also a complicated issue. But our recommendation for exercise is you should do some. It should be something you love, because again, speaking of constrained environments, you will do it if you enjoy doing it. So we're all about spend some time discovering what's fun for you and what you enjoy and what brings you joy, and then chances are you're going to do it. For us, that happens to be CrossFitting and mountain biking and backpacking, and we love to paddle still, but who knows, whether that's playing tennis or pickleball or jujitsu. I mean, man, the sky's the limit out there in terms of what's, like Lisa, who's our podcast producer, she is the #1 best rucker in the world. She's out there rucking in the hills behind our neighborhood all the time. I mean, it doesn't matter what you do. And so that's why we mention exercise, but it's like an afterword, because we don't consider it a practice in the same way as the others.
And if you're listening to this and you're a busy person saying, when do I fit this all in? If you're doing these things, you could go to bed and say, wow, I've taken care of my body. I have developed a full physical practice that nurtures and prepares me that when I have a window of opportunity, I can take advantage of it. And that's really what we want people to understand, is that if you, in times of your life where you get 2 days a week to exercise, cool. I mean, that's amazing, but it doesn't mean it's an all or nothing thing. There's so many things you can do to be having positive net input into the physical, psycho-emotional system. Then when you decide, or you have agency or time to exercise, you can and go for it. And then you can actually be better prepared for that.
Yeah. And maybe you won't be in pain the entire time you do it.
Yeah. Oh, and I think that's it, right? It's not you're on a diet or off a diet. It's like, how are you adding amino acids or proteins to your plate? How are you adding fruit and veggies to your plate? How are you adding movement to your day? How are you balancing to put your shoes on? How are you just walking outside after a meal to bring your blood sugar down and get out of your 90-degree angles? These little things are approachable to everyone. And that's where where you're not leaving people out by saying hey, head to our CrossFit gym and let's do a crazy workout for 90 minutes or something, or, lift more than your body weight. That feels really intimidating to a lot of people. And maybe it's just not in the cards for them, but you don't want to be in pain. You want your tissues, to be healthy and not inflamed. You want to be sleeping well. And I'm so excited for people to get their hands on your book, Built to Move. I'm so excited to introduce both of you to my community. It's been so fun to follow along for so many years, and to finally sit across the internet table from you and just talk about all the work that you guys have done together and the amazing power team that you are. And just so people know, you guys are so passionate about this, even starting at a young age. I know you guys are passionate about getting standing desks into schools and getting your kids off their phones and getting them out in the world and in nature. And it's just, it's really motivating for me as a parent and as a wife and as, all of it. So thank you for spreading the good word and being realists so that people can just get moving and feel good.
Well, I just want to say it's a total honor to be here. And thank you so much for having us. It's just a pleasure. And we can't wait to have a coffee with you in real life.
I know. Let's do it. Well, thanks, guys. Where can they follow along? Where can they get the book? Where can they listen to your podcast, courses, all the stuff?
Sure. You can get the book at builttomove.com or anywhere you would get a book. And we are at the Ready State on all the social channels. Our podcast is called the Ready State Podcast, and we're at thereadystate.com as well.
And let me just add that if you feel like you're controlling some of this and you're working on this as kind of your jam, but you know that there's a family member or a friend who doesn't know where to start, not only is this book a great resource for them to get started because it's so accessible, but we also have this incredible 21-day Built to Move challenge that is free. All you need to do is put in your email, and we've got daily content support, because we really feel like once people feel how simple it is and feel much better they can actually be in their lives, how present they can be, we've got you hooked forever.
There you go. They're feeling good. They want more. That's
Seriously,
how it goes.
That's what it's about.
Well, thanks, guys. This was a blast. I'm so excited for your new book. Best of luck.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.